saying that it was going to kick Linda out of the meeting. Oh, and she got kicked out anyways. It's recording now, and Linda, I imagine, will be back in just a moment. Not sure what happened there.
Okay, should we continue or wait?
So yeah, we have the recording going at least.
We still have quorum, right?
Yep.
Yep. It shows it's recording on my end.
Yes, it is. Just took a while to start.
Good.
So, Esma, I think you're all set now, okay?
Awesome, awesome. So our item on the agenda is to elect a vice chair. How do we do that? I know last time we talked about this in the school committee meeting when we did a similar thing.
Right.
Is it roll call?
Yeah, Esma, you just call for nominations and then call for a second nomination and then go through the roll call on who people want to vote for.
Awesome, awesome. Brendan, do you, if you don't mind, who are the 6 people that are on this call? Because I didn't take down that.
Sure. We have
on the phone. I can't see.
Understood. Yeah, we have Jeff Haynes, Linda Woodland, Scott Brown, Melissa Ayala, Malaya Gustafson, Krista Bennett, and Linda Long. Julio.
Okay, who was the first one? Was it Scott?
Jeff Haynes.
Jeff Haynes, okay. Got it.
And I am on it.
Easy.
Okay. So do we have nominations for vice chair?
You can nominate yourself.
I think we're all just shy. Tired.
I nominate Scott Brown.
Do
I
we
second.
have a second?
I second.
Okay. Any other nominations?
Do you have time, Scott?
Oh, yeah.
I don't care. I was just asking.
But I know Osama is never going to miss a meeting, so.
Any other? I mean, I hope someone else. If Scott, I think you'd be a great choice too. But if anybody else wants to nominate themselves or someone else,
Sure, I'll nominate myself.
who was that?
Linda Woodland. I'll second that nomination too.
Yep, I second.
I do, just to say,
Any more
just to put another name out there, but I'm sure Scott would do fantastic.
Thank you, Linda.
Scott, do you want to do it, or do either of you want to do it, or are you both just
Yeah, I mean,
doing it because you're good human beings?
No. Let's take the vote.
Oh, that's a hard choice. That's a
do
hard
it.
choice. I'm telling you, between the two of you.
Yeah,
both
it's
good.
like flipping a coin. It's all good.
You can do your coin flip off screen. I won't be offended.
Okay.
So since we have 2 nominations removed and 6 people, are there any other person that wants to be nominated or wants to nominate someone? If I hear nothing, I guess that would mean no. And we have two great choices.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we can move on to roll call vote now. I believe so, right?
Yep.
Okay. In that case, I'll just go down the list. Member Jeff Haynes, what's your vote?
Linda.
And Member Linda Woodland, what's your vote?
Is it uncouth to vote for yourself? I don't know.
It's
I
fine.
nominate myself. I'll vote for myself.
Your vote, yes, Linda. Member Melissa. Your vote,
I
please.
vote for Linda too.
Malia, your vote?
I literally flipped a coin, so I'll vote for Linda. Sorry. I don't really care.
Well, our other members, so your vote.
Who?
Yes, you, Linda Belil.
I'm going to say, I'm going to vote for Linda, but I want Scott to know that, but I think he'd also be very good. And I just know he's the head of legal, for crying out loud. And we're having a lot of union negotiations this year, especially. So, yeah. So they're both really good choices.
Awesome. So, Scott.
And I also vote for Linda.
Well, I guess you have to vote. So, congratulations, Linda.
Thank you, and I'm glad.
Thank you, Linda.
Didn't offend you, Scott.
So I didn't get to vote, but because Scott is so busy, I vote for Linda as well. This is Krista.
I'm sorry, I must have missed you. Who was speaking?
That's Krista Bennett.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't have you on the list that you were on the call. So awesome. I'm glad you joined. So that goes from our first agenda item, well, our second agenda item. For the third agenda item, the review of our charge as a subcommittee. Now, from my understanding, I can share with you what I understand that our review of charge would be. And then I'd like to open the floor for comments and additions to that review. Is that proper Robert rules? Is that okay?
Works for me.
Okay. So the way I see this is before I even start this, I want to just apologize that I'm not on video. I literally am in the parking lot of Mass General right now. My daughter was transported to the Mass General over the weekend for complications of surgery. So that's the reason video, and I'm doing this over phone, which is the worst thing possible when you're doing your first meeting and learning the rules as you go. So in terms of the review of charge for this subcommittee, the way, I am seeing this, since it's a new subcommittee, and please feel free after I'm done to add what kind of charges you think we have as a subcommittee, add on to it, edit it, but I just wanted to lay it out there of what I foresee for us doing. My first item, I would say, as one of our charges would be to look at the curriculum that we have at all levels of our district, in the sense of history, in the sense of religion, in the sense of cultural diversity, to see what kind of books and in history classes that we end up teaching our children at all different grade levels, of course, age appropriate and grade level appropriate. In that case, we would definitely need some input from the teachers, definitely a lot of help from Bob Burlow, who's the curriculum director. And if you've read the email that came out with the student testimonies, that kind of resonated also from some of their comments, was they were looking for more variety of education on different cultures, different races, different religions, so that it's more inclusive and welcoming. The second choice that I see is also looking into professional development, looking at what kind of education are we giving the teachers, so that we teach them on the educational part that they would need to be able to teach these areas that would go back into the curriculum aspect of our charge. The third one that I also foresee is looking at the holiday calendar. Part of being inclusive is to allow kids to practice, you know, the religion or cultural kind of important dates that they would prefer to celebrate. So, for example, I understand, you know, we only can give so many days off for students. I understand that there's so many, you know, holidays we can realistically understand and highlight. But at the same time, if the child was, for example, given the choice of choosing 2 to 3 holidays that they would prefer to celebrate, you know, just sharing it with the teachers and the particular school they go to, so that those days are not required to necessarily do, you know, they may be able to make up a test or won't have homework due. It's just a, you know, a way to look at stuff. That's just a suggestion, but something that has to do with the holidays and the calendar. And the fourth issue that I see that we could have a charge for is to allow, you know, issues being voiced. So it was great that I saw this email that there was a way for students to anonymously, you know, talk about some of the issues that they have seen and what they would want to see in terms of diversity and becoming more inclusive. So I think that, you know, issues to be heard not only by the students but by the teachers and the parents is a great avenue, and having them as stakeholders somehow in part of our community to be able to come and put their input in these aspects, these 4 different aspects that I foresee. So I'm going to leave it open to people's comments and additions and what they think of in my interpretation, what do they think the charge of this subcommittee is?
No, awesome. I think those charges are great. I definitely want to see us design some policy, especially around, because I've gone to a lot of Black Lives Matter, and I heard a lot of the Wachusett students, former students, current students, and there's a lot of inconsistencies in 13 buildings on how they handle racist comments that are made that were brought up to the principal. And so sometimes it does get to higher administration, up to Dr. Sometimes it doesn't. And so I think that we as a committee should look at having some policy that if there is a student, teacher, anything about anti-bullying and things like that, that maybe it should be directed to up to the principal, but then the principal has to bring it to HR or something. And there's a person in human resources that is their responsibility to investigate and things like that. Because I'm finding through all the stories that I've heard, there is an inconsistency in the district when somebody does complain, and it doesn't always get up to the high level.
I completely agree with you. I do know Education Subcommittee had reviewed a bullying policy like a year or so ago, and it was an attempt to, formalize that process that you're talking about. But I guess what you're saying is maybe to have like a report on how exactly each school is implementing that policy, correct? Because I believe we have a policy.
And maybe take it out of the hands of the building principals, that it has to go to human resources. And that's just my suggestion. And as a committee, I just think that we should look at the protocol on if there is a complaint, where does it go? And who researches it, who investigates it, and things like that. Because I find that a lot of times it gets brushed under the rug, and that is a common thread that I heard in the students and the parents. So we should take this very seriously as a district. So.
And Linda Woodland here.
Noted.
To add on to that, I think kind of a different charge than the anti-bullying policy, just because the anti-bullying policy is really focused student to student on And I think that when it comes to an anti-racism, like you're saying, Scott, I think that it can be unwittingly, and I really want to stress unwittingly, happening among the adults in the building. And so I think that it's probably looking at it in a little bit different, but to make sure that it does go up, has a strong chain of who deals with investigating and where it goes. I will say that I definitely second the idea of looking at the holiday calendar and how that's handled. That's something that was I found surprising when I moved up to Central Mass, was that there were a lot of these questions we had handled in Central New Jersey back when I was a student in the 80s and 90s, and they were just kind of not even on anybody's radar. So just handling how to do inclusive holidays, I think, is something that would be really important to address. So I think that part of our charge is a good priority.
I think it makes sense.
And I just want to jump on, just everyone can mute if you're not talking. I'm just trying to take minutes, and it's a little bit of interference, so that'd be a help. Thank you.
I agree with all the points. Everything that's been laid out sounds rock solid to me. I like the idea of the curriculum evaluation in particular. I would like to kind of couple that idea with what we've been talking about. I would like, as part of, it may not be a curriculum textbook per se, or maybe it exists, but I would like to also maybe make a part of that teaching about how to deal with these situations, all at age-appropriate levels. I agree, absolutely. There has to be a chain for reporting these things when they happen. I was just, like all of you, appalled at the stories where people were dealing with this garbage and little or nothing was done about it, which is, it's just beyond words. So obviously what Scott and Linda were talking about is dead on, but I also think as part of the curriculum, maybe if there's some sort of tools from early age and on, teaching about, what this is, how to recognize it, even when it's all very seemingly subtle and coy and whatever else you want to say, ways for people to identify this, so that we know, so that I say we, so the kids, as they're growing up, everybody can see it, recognize it, and have the tools, have the wherewithal to process this as it is happening in real time, and of course, as has been articulated, have the avenue to report these events as well. And the only other thing I could really think to say is that it was incredibly valuable to hear what we heard in our meeting after when all the letters came in and the committee members were talking and parents were talking and sending it. That was incredibly valuable. I think people would agree. And so I would say that it would probably be useful for us, very helpful, very valuable still for us as we go forward, maybe to survey or solicit more feedback as we come up with specific topics, specific things that we're looking to do, to ask the students, past and present, ask parents, say, what was wrong, what worked, what didn't work, how can we do better? I feel like there are people out there who can be, already have been and can continue to be incredibly helpful to us. It's certainly worth asking them.
So I would like to kind of comment a little bit here. So I grew up in this town, and I graduated from the high school. I'm half Black, half white, and what I went through was incredibly difficult and colonizing. where the education that I received within the community here made me feel as though half of me was wrong or bad. So what I want is to make sure that that doesn't happen any further with, you know, the students that are growing up here, and bringing my daughter here and her experiencing some of those issues within the school system already, and only having been here for 3 years is just heartbreaking, as I thought that, you know, things would get better since the 80s. So what I've noticed is that it's not, so it's going to be very difficult, not impossible, but difficult to make sure that the curriculum is perfect, unless, you know, each one of us takes a couple of the textbooks and really skims through them, and each of us is a perfect historian, right? So that's going to be very difficult for us to do. Getting approved curriculum would be fantastic. There are some curriculums out there right now that a lot of communities are embracing that we could consider. You guys have probably heard of them. One of them is, what is it, the 1619 curriculum that a lot of people are considering. And then there's another one that is like a commentary to that. But I think what's going to be most important is for the children to, at a very young age, realize what they are doing when they are saying these awful things, because I don't think that they realize that their words do have weight, and they find it funny, and it is encouraged to be strong and funny, and to make fun of people that I've noticed in this area. And I haven't noticed that in other areas that I've been in. So to not necessarily have an anti-bullying campaign, but more of a how to be a good person curriculum that starts at the root, that starts like in preschool and follows them all the way through high school. So I do have suggestions for both of those areas. If we're interested in those, I can send those around for people to read. And that's about it from me.
I would definitely want to see those suggestions.
I would too.
I will, I'll send them out to everybody to peruse.
I just have a question, just from the end of last year's school committee, and the question of sharing materials. Do we need to share it through the chair, through Rebecca, or is that more of a concern with the full committee versus a sub? Just
Right.
wanting to make sure that we're okay with open meeting law.
Yeah, you should send anything to Rebecca, and Rebecca will forward it on, and we should not respond to all. So.
Right.
Yeah, so if you can just send it to Rebecca and ask it to be shared with the subcommittee, I think that's the proper route.
Yes.
Will do. Sounds good.
Do we have any more suggestions or edits to the charges?
This is Malia, since you can't see me. I had two questions and a thought. One is that I definitely think the curriculum, I was shocked to hear that our curriculum was so not at least even attempting to be multicultural, is you know what I mean. I was shocked to hear that from our students, because I just assumed, as a district of our type in our part of the state, as a suburban district, we probably would be on top of that and would have been on top of that. So I was surprised. So that is one of my concerns. And there's a lot of different levels to that. I don't think we can necessarily make sweeping changes overnight. And I think it's having observed a couple of curriculum discussions with the curriculum group for the district, I know that it's kind of a slow process, even though we want it to not be. So that's, I think it may take some time, and there's a lot of different ways to go about it. So I don't want to pretend I know the right way, but that's one of my, not really concerns, but there's like a global curriculum you can adopt, or you can work with teachers that find ways to integrate this in and train all the teachers and work down from there. I don't know. I mean, I know the curriculum that Krista mentioned. I also know of a group in the state that I found by accident through a training I did myself about, it was about digital civic engagement, but they actually work a lot with these types of issues, and they're called Facing History and Ourselves. And they're a national group, but they don't just deal with diversity and racial issues. They deal with all kinds of issues, but they tie it into a global and multicultural perspective. They're free. They're a nonprofit. They have teaching resources and free webinars for teachers. Then they have regional groups, and they have one for New England. I follow them on Twitter. So they, in the regional groups, they actually tie some of their programming to the curriculum standards in each state or region. That's the purpose. Groups, as I said, I found them by accident doing something about civic engagement, which is my background. But it may be another interesting avenue just to look into. Because I actually told a couple of our teachers about them last year, and they do experiential things. So they also do a lot of experiential activities. Like, I won't go into detail, but it's just an interesting group. Free, which I like. So I think that's one of my contagious curriculum in general. My other thought is that I think another piece that I don't know that we can do ourselves, but need to think about is, I know the administrative group did a book study last year, but like when I started hearing all these stories, I said, probably not possible, but really as a school committee, as administration, we should even be looking at these issues, like from the top down. Like there's trainings and groups and things online to look at things like implicit bias, just not even reading a whole book, but there's all kinds of things out there, just discussions that are online. And I think that's something that even as decision makers, everyone should be looking at, not just the building principals and Daryl reading their book, but it should be something we're encouraging everyone to examine, because that's how you get people who aren't aware of these issues to become more aware of these issues. I also, even when they did the book study, it may be something, if we're looking at professional development, to encourage facilitators to come in, because I know when they did the book study, you can only see so much when you're facilitating it yourself. But when you have a trained facilitator come in, or you use a guided discussion guide or something of that sort, you get to different issues that you may not see yourself if you're facilitating yourself, talking about things like implicit bias. I'm not an expert. I don't do this as my job, but I have done a lot of trainings around it. I used to work with college students and getting them prepared to work with a lot of different communities and different settings that they weren't used to, and different populations, and a whole slew of things. So it's just something that's, a different way to approach it. So that's just something that I throw out there. I don't think there's any right way to do it. I also, in hearing all the students that talked to us, I think the original, Megan's initial charge specifically mentioned Black Lives Matter. And I think that's important. That's obviously what's driven all this discussion. But I remember that about half of our student testimonies were students that actually weren't Black. They were Asian or other nationalities in our district. So I think the idea of looking at all cultures and religion is important, and not just limiting it to any, one particular group, but figuring out a way to recognize all of them also is kind of important. Just only because I remember we heard specifically from about half the student testimonies. I remember 3 of them specifically were students that were Asian that had similar issues. So I just don't want to lose sight of their voices either. But I think there's a big challenge in figuring out how to do it, and be inclusive is probably our biggest part. But I'm very excited that we have a group committed to it.
Yes. Yes.
So who have we not heard from? I know we heard from Scott and Malia. Who was left?
Melissa, I have something to say.
Yes, please.
One of the bigger things that I think should be noted probably is having family involvement, families being more aware of diversity all around. They can also teach their kids that there is a diverse, school is very diverse, and we need to treat people the same all around, no matter what. So I don't know how, haven't really thought about how we can get the word across to families to make their kids more aware of diversity in the schools. I think that's where it stems from a lot of the time. Families not opening up and being, I guess, straightforward with their children about being, about knowing there's diversity across the board, I guess, is the biggest thing.
Melissa, I have a partial answer later, just to preview about the parent piece. So once everybody's done.
Sorry, what was that?
I'll speak to the parent piece and some initial things that we're planning. After everybody's done, I just want to make sure to give everyone on the committee.
Great. Okay. All right. And I definitely agree with the looking at the curriculum, especially some of the hot topic history. Just off of the top of my head, like Columbus, Christopher Columbus, things like that. Definitely it has to be looked at from my point of view.
And this is Linda. I just want to add, I do think it would be helpful to get some input from our teachers, because they may have ideas about how they could integrate more content regarding diversity into their curricula. You know, and I think since they're doing the actual teaching, I think it's important to hear what they have to say and have them, for lack of a better term, to have their buy-in on whatever we end up coming up with.
There are some teachers doing this sort of thing already, I know, and so it's important. I know of two that have been posting things all over Facebook all summer about studies related to how to teach these topics and different books they're looking at, and this is how they're using their professional development this summer. So definitely important to get their perspective, I think.
No, I agree. On our PD days, we spend $200,000 a day, and so we really need to have the teachers, as Linda said, a buy-in. Asama, I know you don't know who's on the call, but we do have one person from the public, Mary Shepard, is on this call. She's the new head of the WREA for the Teachers Union. So we don't have on our agenda a public forum, but I know when I run my subcommittees, if there's somebody on, we can ask them if they have anything to say. So.
Yeah, and that can be done at any time, right? So we can ask her to share. But before we ask her to share, is anybody else left from the subcommittee that hasn't spoken about their input on the charges?
Hi, I'm just Catherine. Could some of you let the student reps into the call? We're both in the waiting room, and it won't let me join unless I call in.
Okay, Rebecca is trying to let you in. I'm not sure what's going on with that. Stand by.
Okay.
Yeah, we're working it.
Okay. So everybody on the subcommittee has spoken?
Hi, this is Mary Shepard. I am an art teacher at Naquag Elementary School, and last summer I took a diversity class that MTA offered, and I learned a lot more than I already knew, and I've already implemented many things in my art room. And I do believe that the problem is deeper than the child, because the child already comes to school with a lot of background knowledge, whether it be the 3 or 4 years that they've been in their house, but their thinking is already set. And I have had blatant racial discrimination in my classroom that I've had to deal with in a kindergarten. No, that was a first grade classroom. So I see it, but I've also started teaching art from the artist. So I will bring in an art artist, and I will put the artist up on the board, and we will actually discuss the physical differences between the artists and the students in the classroom, so that we understand that we want to embrace each other's different skin colors, and not the old-fashioned word of being colorblind, because when you're colorblind, you're ignoring the other culture that exists. So that's just really a little tidbit of what I'm doing in my particular room. But there's definitely, I'm so happy that the conversation is happening, and it hopefully will bring a kinder, more inclusive community together.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Did we get the student reps in the call?
You know, we're having some kind of technical issue with that. Rebecca is trying to let them in. We're working on it. And when everybody's done, I just wanted to speak just briefly.
Yeah, I believe. Go ahead. Did somebody go from the subcommittee? That's what I wanted to make sure first. Was it you, Linda, who wanted to say something?
No, I already did say something. I think everyone on the subcommittee has spoken, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. So, Brendan, I think if that's the case, I think you can take your turn.
Okay, and thank you, first of all, for all that input. You know, I'm your administrative liaison for this group too, and I'm really excited to be. I mean, this is it can't be understated or overstated how important this topic is. I'm actually I always like to bring something to the conversation, and you know, I come from a background of doing this work in other districts, so I'm going to take over your screens, and I know Asima, you don't have a screen. But I'm just going to take over just for a minute, just to give you a little background, because we do have, in this upcoming school year, we're going to be having a stakeholder group start that will be looking at this, and it will be working in tandem with this group. So I think when we run against things that might not necessarily fall to school committee, there'll also be that safety net of there'll be another group working in tandem with this group that will really just help us to start this work in a meaningful way. So, so I just want to introduce myself, because a lot of you, I haven't met you in person. I've met you in this virtual world, but I am the Director of Social Emotional Learning for the district. And I just started here back in October. It's been quite a year, really quite a year. And just background-wise, I've worked as a paraprofessional, special ed teacher, school social worker, assistant principal, and most recently and most relevant, a restorative practices coordinator. And this was in an urban district in Massachusetts, and it was on a grant, a national grant, to look at disparities in discipline along the lines of race. So that was embedded professional development. So this is a topic near and dear to my heart. The most important and pressing thing, and it ties into a lot of your comments just now, is I will be facilitating the district's diversity, equity, and racism stakeholder group, separate from school committee, but we'll be looking for members to join that. Think of it as similar to what our task force was for the reopening. It will be a diverse group of stakeholders that we're actually looking at having an outside partner help us put this together to actually choose who will be on it. The reason for that is really bias. I mean, we need to model that we're not immune to bias. You know, I'm very careful about those types of things, but we need to give the community confidence that we're not just cherry picking people that are going to push forward an agenda that'll be really neutral. So we're actually, I've been, in addition to the school reopening work, which has been, as you can imagine, a lot of time, starting the planning process for that. So I just want to mention that, because I think that's on people's minds, that we have this very important subcommittee, and then there are going to be some things that go beyond it, and that this subcommittee is going to be involved with. So I just want to mention that at first. But the school culture.
I just have one question. When this is in tandem to the, can you just explain how we can work with each other? Like, what's the process? Because that is definitely something that most of us did say, or at least wanted to be interested in, is have parent input, community input, teacher input, right? So how would that tandem work? I just wanted to be clear.
So we can, we need to figure that out together. You know, that I don't have a preconceived way that would work out. At the very least, it's having school committee members and probably people from this group, which would make the most sense, to sit on that stakeholder group and to be part of those conversations. Because what it will allow us to do is to basically bring in, we mentioned that we don't have public comment in these meetings. We can have open dialogue and within that group. So we'll discuss it. We should figure that out, Asima, how that will work. But at the very least, having seats at the table, at the virtual table these days.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm going to try to be brief on this, but I think it's important to put out some of the key concepts related to all this stuff, because, the question always is, how are we going to do this work? All right. That's been what my focus has been before this district, and I'm excited that we have a chance to bring it here. It really is tied into school culture. And school culture, and I'm going to read more than I normally would, just because we have at least Asima calling in. So I'm sorry to put you through this, but I think it's important. So school culture refers to the way that teachers and other staff members work together and the set of beliefs, values, and assumptions they share. And a positive school climate and school culture promotes a student's ability to learn. It's probably the best definition. And that's all tied into this equity work too, because when we hear from students that are not feeling a member of the community, that are in some cases having really overt discriminatory acts happen against them, that really is something we need to tie back to school culture. So as we think about what a school culture would look like that would be inclusive, would be every student and adult in the school community feels a sense of belonging, connection, and safety. And the safety is not just physical safety, it's also psychological safety. Parents and guardians are in partnership with the schools. Their child or children attend. That was mentioned a few times about parent input and how important it is. That's a huge part of school culture. And that it's a partnership, it's two ways. Differences are explored with a sense of curiosity and appreciation. That, we just heard about that old idea of colorblindness and I don't see culture. That's actually not what we'd be going for in an inclusive school culture. It'd be that we actually really are interested in finding out more about cultures that exist within Wachusett, but also ones that don't. Sometimes when we have a district like this where we have a lot of people that are we don't have a lot of cultural diversity. If you look at the numbers, there's a thing called cultural insulation that can happen, where kids especially, they think that's the world because it is their world. So it's about looking at differences and being curious and open. And this is the piece that really is tied into the bullying and conflict resolution. This came up when we did the bullying review, was this idea of restorative practices. So conflict is resolved proactively and in ways that restore relationships and increase empathy. This is a huge part of it because conflicts are going to happen. The goal is never to get rid of conflict. It's to make conflict and disagreement productive so that it leads to a better outcome. And it's learning also for both sides, for the victim of what happened and also the person who did it. And that's the restorative practices piece, where we've already had some interest from schools in the district about getting deeper into that. So, and it did come up in our bullying group. And I'm just going to quickly go through a little bit on bias because I think it's important to talk about. What is invisible becomes visible if it goes unchecked. And on the left side of this are beliefs, attitudes, and mindsets. This is where bias sits. And I'll just go through this. We don't see bias, but we do see the actions that come out of bias, and that's where discrimination and racism happen. So this is directly from a PD that I did with teachers at a nearby district. And bias, again, it's passive. We don't see it. It's a blind spot for some people too. We all have it. Bias is not bad or good. It just is. It's like a reflex. Where discrimination really is where bias becomes an act. So, and I just want to mention, this is just kind of previewing where we might go. Because when you talk to teachers and administrators about bias, it can be really enlightening. And when we look at the different kinds of biases, not just racial and cultural, and you can see that's there, but also the other kinds. And this is going to be a lightning round because I know, we have a late meeting here. But this is a way to preview how would this actually possibly end up in schools once we get the stakeholder group together and figure out where to head. It's a learning bias. This is really kind of an interesting one that you could reflect on as a group. We tend to teach how we are taught, and we prefer students who learn like discuss. The really interesting example has to do with honors and AP track teachers. Many teachers have come up through that track. School was, a place that they excel, and a lot of times that makes sense to become a teacher. Not all, but some. So this is again a bias that can play out, that they may teach better to students that were like them, that were, whatever it might be. So it's a lot easier to recognize a learning bias in yourself than initially to say, oh, I guess I have race or ethnic biases. That's a really big pill to swallow for people. So when we do this kind of bias work with teachers, we start with these less intrusive, less, the more difficult ones. We start with the ones that aren't as difficult so that they can begin to think that bias is actually real. Let's go through a few more. This negativity bias, so anybody that's taught, or even for your own kids, if you have multiple kids and you might have one that acts up a little more than others, they're the one you tend to look at first if you hear a noise in the room. And this is just, human nature. We tend to, so the harder it becomes to truly see the whole student, because we tend to look at that. And this is one that teachers usually jump right on, like, oh yeah, I always look at Johnny because, he's the one, and sometimes it's not even him. It's the person hiding behind. There's developmental delays. We look at, a bias that can play out for teachers with kids that are on IEPs, and sometimes lowering expectations for them. A bias sometimes that is a helpful bias. It's sometimes meant to really meet students where they are, but we look at, where are they, that they might lower their expectations for them. Gender bias is one that you hear about more often than others. That we, especially with middle school and high school kids, generally, we tend to punish and disparage typical adolescent boy behaviors and reward and reinforce compliant self-management behaviors that are more associated with girls, generally speaking. So again, these are just ways that we get to bias. And then we would get to racial and cultural bias too, because it really, understanding that bias is real is kind of the beginning of all of this. So I say this all just to preview where we could go with this work. And, it really, having an outside partner in this will really help to keep us honest, to be honest with you. The work begins with acknowledging the social, behavioral, and cognitive biases are real, and they never really go away. So it's not about getting rid of bias, because anybody that's ever taken the implicit bias test, it's very enlightening. And even if you've done a lot of work on your own biases, you can find that you still have them. Because it's not about getting rid of them, it's about putting them in check. And also, this is a big one for our district especially. We need to understand how our own ethnicity, family background, and experiences influence our values and beliefs about students' learning and discipline. And we can consciously red flag the biases. So we recognize them when they pop up. And that's a really important part of it all, that if a bias is playing up, we might recognize it and then check ourselves. And I mentioned, it could be any of us here, it could be teachers as well. The key with all of this is that judgment really should go to the side. When people feel attacked and that they're bad for biases, for example, that's a very difficult starting point, because they tend to close off. Human nature is we close off. So the way we go about this work in the district is going to be very thoughtful, deliberate, and with a sense of urgency still. We can still be steady, thoughtful, and deliberate, and be moving forward for many reasons, in response to the students that spoke out at school committee, and also just because every district I've worked in has had work to do on this. This is not just Wachusett specific. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of background, because I think in introducing some of the concepts can help us shape the conversation, not only here, but on the stakeholder group. So I just wanted to kind of go there. Engaging schools is who I've worked with in the past out of Cambridge, and I borrowed their materials and cited them here. But so I'm happy to comment on anything there. I will stop taking over your screen now. Thanks for letting me share that with you.
No, thank you. That was, I haven't listened, but that was very informative. I believe our next item on our agenda is next steps in planning on how we move forward. But before we start that, I just wanted to make a statement as full disclosure. So I have by the way, I'm a director of enjoyinggood.org, which is an organization I co-founded. And I have done a lot of diversity training to different schools, teachers, and staff on, but I truly believe personally that many of these issues should be told and taught by the people who have experienced them or who are of that ethnic, religious, race, whatever group that is talking on their behalf should be the ones speaking and teaching. For that reason, I had co-founded this organization, and I did actually do presentations to the principals of our schools and many of the teachers in our district. But I have been invited many other times to schools across Massachusetts to also present to students, all age levels, elementary, middle, and high school. I just wanted to put it out there as full disclosure that's what I do on the side. But in terms of next steps and planning on moving forward, do we have suggestions on what items that we need to get information on? Who do we want to invite to our next meeting to help us maybe decide our next steps or maybe have some input in some of our charges?
This is Linda Woodland. I would suggest that we bump up on priority doing some kind of training for ourselves, since we're going to be looking at the policies to set forth to the full committee for the district as a whole. I think that it would be helpful to make sure that we as a committee are on the equal footing on where we are on what the issues are. So I don't know if there's some, if that's possible to work on doing our training. I don't know if that necessarily needs to happen before other steps, but I think that that might need to be an early one.
That's a good one. Brendan, do you know, would you have suggestions? Because, I mean, we're going to be suggesting, right, on TV. So how do we go about doing that? Is there a process?
So we should talk. I wonder about the Mass School Committee Association, what they might have to recommend. That'd be a good starting point. Happy to be part of that conversation, though, to figure out who's available, who's reliable, and who we could get in for the school committee members.
Okay. Any other steps and the other ideas on moving forward?
This is Malia. I will, under the vein of being inclusive, I don't know, but I think at some point, if there's anyone else we need to get input from in terms of the people we're representing and what they think our priorities should be in our work moving forward, because this is a new committee. I don't know the best way to do that, or if we need to do, the looking at ourselves first and then work down, or if it's something we could create some sort of mechanism for that would inform our work in some other way. It's more of a question. I don't really know where that fits, though.
Okay, so you're asking for the process of how to bring in input of other stakeholders?
Yeah, I was thinking that we have a sense of what our charge is, which we've now discussed, and I don't know in terms of looking at what either prioritizing or different aspects that we're considering. If there's some way that we would like.
You got cut off a little bit, Malia. Could you repeat that?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, weird internet. It was really more of a question about wanting to get additional stakeholder input, and we have our thought of what our charge is, but I don't know if we need or want to get other input into what other people would like to see us working on, or what they think our priorities should be, or if we want to save that for further down the road, that's fine. It was more of a question about process and when that might fit.
Okay. And Brendan, maybe you can add on to this, but in my opinion, after what you stated, that could be better answered after we talk about the stakeholder group that you were talking about?
I think that makes sense, if it makes sense for the group, because that'll be a good, like the task force was for reopening, a good conduit of information. People will know they can go there. And then, my thought, I was going to mention this to the group, would be for that stakeholder group to periodically, once we get up and running, to come to this group and basically discuss our progress and how things are going, just to keep the communication going.
One thing I'd like to know, because of the, I have itemized like 5 lists of our kind of overview of our charges. And one of them is there a way we can get information on the way we assign holidays and what our calendar looks like at the present? And what I'd be interested in is to find out what is the distribution of, and I don't know if we have this information for our schools, is, what religions are represented in our schools by our kids, and even by our administration and teachers. So that way we can, I think we can look at, in terms of holiday calendars, of course, we can generically look at, the world, major religions, but just in case, if there's certain ones that we're not thinking of, I'd be a little bit curious to know, what should we be really looking at? I mean, if anybody else had an advice on how to move, because that's something I believe we can start tackling sooner rather than later. The other things like curriculum and professional development and, having stakeholders and ways of it seems a little bit more involved, and it's going to require a lot more time and, having other people come in and give us their input. But I believe this is something we could definitely get started sooner rather than later.
I do have just like a quick comment about the, religious holidays and stuff. So there are so many. Like Halloween is a religious holiday for pagans. So I think that there's so many holidays, and then there's also people who don't believe in just one religion. They believe in many. So if we start asking people to let us know what their religion is at the beginning of the year so that we can give them those days off, I feel like that's going to really come into a very, that's a very private matter. And yes, having more days off to notice these religions, that would be fantastic. But maybe just, recognizing and saying, this is Halloween, but it's also called this. Would be a really nice thing. I just think that, getting to the whole like days off thing, especially, for people who do practice many religions, Unitarian Universalists, for example, that's, you could find a religious holiday every week if you wanted to.
Right. I think in terms of what was being proposed for the holiday calendar, it's not necessarily days off. I'm not sure if that's within our purview, because some of the number of days of school that is required for kids to go to, and with our union of how much the teachers work, I don't think we have that purview necessarily to say we're going to take 50 days off, right?
It
but
seemed
I
very
think
overwhelming.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
It seemed like almost a very overwhelming and impossible task to have all of those days off. I just wanted to clarify and make sure that that's not what we were trying to do.
Yeah, I don't believe that's possible. I meant it in terms of just looking at in terms of maybe applying some major religious holidays just as dates on our own school calendar, so that teachers are aware that if somebody in their class happens to be someone who wants to practice that day, they just are cognizant of it. And if anybody else has other ideas, that would be great. I know we did that with some of our school agendas. I remember back in Davis Hill, they used to order, school packets, and the agendas they used to order had some of the major holidays in their calendars, so that, kids or teachers, as they would flip, would know that, Yom Kippur was landing on possibly this day, and, et cetera, et cetera. If there's anything else for next steps or moving forward?
This is Linda. I'm wondering, I mean, we've got 4 or 5 topics that we've discussed. I'm wondering if you sent them around, Asama, and we each sort of prioritize them or put them in what we think might be the appropriate order to tackle one by one. Would that be helpful? That would provide some input as to what what order we ought to tackle these really, really big issues in. Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely. People's input on their priorities definitely will help. But correct me if I'm wrong, would everyone have to send that to Rebecca before we get it all shared?
Well, I think maybe Rebecca could send us out a synopsis of our priorities, and we can individually respond to Rebecca on what priorities should come first and things like that. And then we should maybe have another meeting in a few weeks and kind of take it from there.
I agree, and I think Scott really did a great entrance into our next item on our agenda if we are done with tasks of moving forward.
So the task meeting going forward would be to prioritize. If you could send it, like I said, if you could send out the list of priorities, and then we could each put them in the order we think makes sense.
And I'm taking notes, so Asama, I can send them to you, and we'll get them to Rebecca.
Sounds good. Sounds good. If we are done with that item on our agenda, we can move forward to, as Scott said, talking about our next meeting.
Okay.
Now, if people want to chime in, what is their, what do they perceive to be very, effective? Do they want to see this as a once a month or biweekly, or just we play it by ear for our next meeting?
I think once a month works, especially since we're having fairly frequent full school committee meetings right now. I think once a month, for the time being, would make sense. And of course, I'm also on the education subcommittee, so I might have a little bit of a bias there. But
I'd agree. Oh,
sorry. I agree too. Once a month would be sufficient.
Yeah, because we're looking at reopening, and on legal, we're very busy, and all the subcommittees are very busy. So we have a deadline coming up in less than a month.
Sounds good to me. I was kind of opting for that myself. Anybody have objections or a different idea?
Can I request that it not be the same night as a school committee meeting?
Same here. I agree.
That's really difficult to get any real work and discussion done when it's right before a school committee meeting. So that's my only input.
Yeah.
Yes.
I would agree with that.
In that case, if it's once a month, I'm looking at the beginning of September, and September 7th is Labor Day. Does September 8th work for everyone?
When's our next? What's our school committee meeting? Our school committee meetings in September are when?
We have one on the 14th, and
okay.
It looks like
29th.
August 24th and then September 14th. We have a gap for some reason.
So then the 8th I think would work. I think that makes sense.
Yep. 8 sounds good.
Yeah, 8 sounds good to me too.
From what I can tell from the phone call, that seems to be a pretty acceptable for everyone.
Yes.
Yep.
Sounds good. So our last item on our agenda, if no one has anything else to input, is adjournment. So I'm ready to take a motion.
So moved.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Sounds good. Roll call vote, right? For this? So member Payne, do I have to do it member by you know, ayes or nays?
Yeah.
I have to do it by roll call?
Yes.
Yes, you do.
Okay, sounds good. So, member Jeff Haynes, you
Wait,
vote to
can
adjourn?
I ask a 2-second question before we adjourn? Did our students get in? And did they have anything
I'm
to say?
on,
Are they still
but I'm
waiting?
calling in.
Okay, I just realized that we hadn't heard from them, and I didn't know if they had anything they
Yes,
needed to
if you want to take a couple of minutes, if you don't mind, to share your
I
input.
apologize.
Okay, I have a 12-page document. I don't know if it was shared with you all, of student input and their comments on racism that they had asked to be shared at the meeting. I was told that it was going to be read at the end. I don't know if you guys have read it separately or what's going on with that. Could one of you update me on the situation? I missed half the meeting trying to dial in, so if someone could update me if you...
We did not read it out loud. It was sent to all the subcommittee members. I read it myself before the meeting. I was not aware that we were going to read it out loud.
I didn't actually get it.
No, I
didn't get it either. No.
So maybe it was sent to you.
Okay.
I
Well,
thought it was sent to everyone, but let me just check. Let me check. If I have to read it out loud, because I was not aware that. Just a second. Let me just check.
I don't think you have to read it out loud. I was just given that suggestion by, I don't know who I emailed. I think it might have been Megan, and I think I emailed Rebecca too about it. And I think they said that you would know who to contact with it and to get it read and to get some of those topics put on the agenda for next week or the next meeting.
Yeah, we can definitely put that on the agenda for next week to have it read out loud. It was not on the agenda for today, but I did get it in the email, and I got it today. And so maybe that's why it was not on the agenda.
Okay. I mean, it doesn't really matter. I want the students to be heard at some point. Like, I don't know, they had all been expecting to be read or at least seen by you all. So I'm very confused at this point.
In terms of the subcommittee, I'm looking at that email. Rebecca did send it out to our subcommittee this morning.
Really? Because
at 10:47 a.m. this morning she sent it out.
Oh, I will go look again.
I'll go look again. I didn't see it.
Wait a second. Maybe I'm looking at the wrong email. It might be my mistake because I'm using a phone here.
That's hard. Yes.
I apologize. I didn't see it.
It only went to you and I.
Okay. So what I'll do, I will ask Rebecca to have it sent to the subcommittee, and we can have it on our agenda for our next meeting.
That makes sense.
All right, perfect. It's 12 pages of student responses. The first introduction's my sort of synopsis of it, and it covers an overview, and then there's about 30 or 40 responses from students about their thoughts and what they think needs to be addressed within the subcommittee.
Great.
Yes, I agree.
Thank you for collecting.
It's something that the subcommittee definitely needs to read because it is really, it's eye-opening on what the kids say, on what they have experienced, and what they want from us as a school district.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for collecting that.
Yeah.
Thank you for reminding, and we will definitely have an agenda for next week.
All right.
For our next meeting. Sorry, I'm misspeaking.
No, I messed you up at the beginning, but I do have a few more to add to it. So it's kind of like a working document as I get them in. I did close, there was a Google response form, but there might be a few more that go up within the next few days of students that have sent me them within this hour that I have to add.
Great.
So, I'm
Thank
sorry
you for
about that.
doing that.
When you're ready, please send it to Rebecca and we'll have it shared with the subcommittee then.
Okay, I did send it to Rebecca already, and she said she had shared it, so I think she shared it to you, so I'll send it to her again, tell her that it wasn't shared to the whole committee.
Yes.
That makes sense.
Yeah. That's great.
You said you had more to add? Did you have more to add?
No, that's really my whole update, and I thought I only heard half the meeting because I had a lot of technical difficulties tonight, but a lot of the student opinions on all of that stuff and anything I would have said would be covered in the document I shared with you, and a lot of what you said is basic stuff that I would have said too, so I totally agree with what you guys said, and you're on the right track.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So I believe I'll motion for adjournment.
Sorry.
Do we have to do it?
Yeah.
So do we have a new motion for adjournment, or is the old one still on the table?
I think the old one's still on the table.
Yeah.
Still on.
Okay.
Because we hadn't
In
voted
that
yet.
case, let's do a roll call. Member Jeff,
Still yes.
member Linda Woodland,
Yes.
Melissa,
Yes.
Maria,
Yes.
Linda Longoria,
Yes. Yes.
Scott,
Brown, yes.
and Krista.
Bennett, yes.
And chair votes yes. So thank you so much for joining us today. Hopefully we'll see you guys on the 8th of September.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Thank
Have a
you.
good night, everyone. Bye-bye.
Hope your daughter feels better. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Good night.
Yes,
Bye.
I hope so too,
Okay,
Asma.